She made more money than every studio head in Hollywood. But that same year, police dragged her away in handcuffs for something most people wouldn't even talk about. Another actress shoplifted baby clothes she didn't need while sitting on $100,000 in the bank. And one legend locked herself in a mansion for 50 years, gulping down 20 sleeping pills a night, convinced someone was trying to poison her. These weren't just breakdowns. They were secrets Hollywood spent decades trying to bury. Today, we're uncovering the truth about the most out-of-control actresses in film history. Greta Garbo. She was the kind of woman who made the world stop, but only when she let it. Greta Garbo didn't fade from fame like others. She fled. In 1941, she was at the peak of her power, offered $270,000 to stay under the MGM spotlight. That's nearly $5 million today. She walked away without flinching. No press tours, no interviews, just silence. She disappeared into a Beverly Hills mansion that looked glamorous on the outside, but turned into a quiet fortress for almost 50 years. Neighbors would whisper about seeing her in the dead of night, shuffling through her garden at 3 a.m. in the same coat she'd worn for decades, mumbling in Swedish to no one. The curtain had fallen, but the audience never left. Garbo had been seeing doctors for agoraphobia since 1925, something almost no one in Hollywood knew. The woman everyone called a goddess was terrified of restaurants. She thought someone might poison her. She'd gulp down up to 20 sleeping pills a night. That level of fear doesn't come out of nowhere. It builds slowly and swallows everything. In 1932, she quietly paid a private investigator $500 a week to tail her own stalker. The man had been following her for 8 years. 8 years. That's obsession meeting obsession. Her fears weren't just emotional. They spilled into every corner of her life. She didn't trust banks. She hid $300,000 in cash around her home. The apartment became a vault of paranoia. And yet, it didn't stop there. She kept journals, 40 years worth, not for her career or memories, but for people. She gave them trust ratings, 1 to 10. Most people got less than a 3. The last thing she ever wrote, 3 days before she died at 84, was simple and devastating. Still alone, still safe, still Greta. She had made over $270,000 per film. When she died, she was worth $32 million. Not a single soul really knew her. Hedy Lamarr Hollywood called her the most beautiful woman alive, but the cameras never caught what was slipping into her purse. She started small. By 1963, department stores across Beverly Hills had already begun passing around her photo. Quiet warnings about the woman with the sweeping technique, the one who'd distract the clerk, then fill her oversized handbag when no one was looking. In 1966, she was caught. Baby clothes, diapers, bottles. She had no infants. Psychiatric experts guessed it was her brain reaching for a version of motherhood she could never quite keep. She had 3 kids, but the relationships were distant, brittle. What truly stunned everyone was that she had $100,000 sitting untouched in her bank account that day. Nearly $1 million by today's standard. She didn't steal because she had to. She stole because something inside her needed to. By 1991, she was 76, nearly blind, worth around $30 million thanks to a patent on frequency hopping technology the military had quietly profited from for decades. That day in Florida, she took $21.48 worth of eye drops and laxatives. Not by accident. The security footage ran for 23 straight minutes. She moved through the store calmly, knowing exactly where to go. Her lawyer argued confusion, old age, fading eyesight. But investigators found she'd driven herself there, parked perfectly, and navigated the pharmacy aisle like a regular. The worst part? Both arrests, 1966 and 1991, came right after major career blows. She was rejected for The Producers just before the first. The second came right after a failed comeback attempt. Doctors said it was textbook self-sabotage. She wasn't trying to get away with it. She was daring the world to see her fail. Dorothy Dandridge. Dorothy Dandridge stood at the top of the world in 1954. She had just become the first black woman nominated for Best Actress at the Academy Awards for Carmen Jones, and the $60,000 paycheck she took home was the kind of number most could only dream of. But off-screen, her life was beginning to fracture. 11 years earlier, she'd given birth to her daughter, Harlow. The child was born with severe brain damage and would never be able to live independently. Dorothy paid $300 a month for her lifelong institutional care, even when money stopped flowing in. Her second husband, Jack Dennison, didn't just make the situation worse, he devastated it. He embezzled almost all of her savings, and by 1962, Dorothy Dandridge had just $2 in her bank account. $2. The same woman who once signed autographs on red carpets now filed for bankruptcy, with debts mounting to $139,000. As bills piled up, she leaned harder into alcohol and prescription meds, particularly tofranil. Some days, she was taking 18 pills just to stay afloat. But the unraveling had started long before Hollywood. Her earliest years were marked by horror few could imagine. At 6, she was sexually abused by her mother's female partner, an experience that left invisible scars that would follow her into every relationship, every performance, every stage. By the early 60s, her days blurred into overdoses and blackouts. Neighbors would find her collapsed in her West Hollywood apartment. And when she did show up on set, she was slurring, dazed, and often couldn't remember her lines. Then came the day no one could undo. September 8, 1965. Her manager found her lifeless body on the bathroom floor. Pill bottles scattered. The coroner discovered lethal levels of tofranil in her system. No one knows if it was an accident or not, but by then, the question hardly mattered. She was gone. All that remained were crushing debts and a daughter who would live the rest of her life in institutional care. Veronica Lake was something else entirely. With that peekaboo hairstyle falling perfectly over one eye, she became a wartime icon. GIs painted her on bomber planes, women copied her look, and studios raced to cast her. But the girl behind the glamour was far from polished. She stood barely 4 feet 11, yet caused earthquakes on set. In 1942, while filming I Married a Witch, she made being late an art form. 4 hours late, day after day, until Paramount started fining her $100 every time. That's $1,600 in today's money, per day. Still, she didn't change. Co-stars dreaded working with her. Eddie Bracken called her the bitch without hesitation. Joel McCrea flat out refused future projects, saying life was too short to do 2 films with her. Her behavior wasn't just inconvenient, it was dangerous. During a kissing scene with William Holden, she bit him so hard he needed stitches. And when director Preston Sturgis discovered she'd been hiding a 6-month pregnancy during shooting, he nearly lost his mind. The studio had to reshoot entire scenes, costing them thousands. Tragedy hit hard in 1943 when she lost a premature baby. That's when the drinking turned from habit to dependency. Some say she drank 2 full bottles of whiskey every day. By the 50s, her Hollywood card was revoked. No one wanted to deal with her anymore. Between 1954 and 1960, she was arrested 7 times for being drunk in public or causing scenes in bars. Her fall wasn't just private, it was brutal and public. From making $3,000 a week, She dropped to $60 bartending at the Martha Washington Hotel in Manhattan. She lived in a $10 a week room above the bar she now served. People who once watched her on silver screens now handed her tips in loose change. In 1973, her body finally gave out. Acute hepatitis and kidney failure finished what the years of whiskey had started. She was only 50. Her organs had been destroyed, her bank account nearly empty, her name a whisper of what it once meant. At the end, her net worth was $500. Not even enough for a proper goodbye. Rita Hayworth. She was just 18 when she stepped into Columbia Pictures, hoping the studio would change her life. It did, but not in the way she had imagined. Harry Cohn, the studio head, started making moves on her almost immediately. It wasn't subtle. Private meetings, lingering stares, whispered comments that turned more aggressive over time. She was still a teenager, caught between ambition and fear. But the moment Gilda made $375 million at the box office, everything changed. Cohn's obsession turned dangerous. He didn't just want her on screen, he wanted her completely under his thumb. He had her followed. Studio spies tracked her every dinner, every night out. He planted listening devices in her dressing room. She couldn't trust anyone, not even the walls. And when she pushed back, when she dared to say no, he made her pay. Literally, he kept her on brutal 16-hour shifts for 6 weeks straight. She was fined $500 for being 5 minutes late, $200 for skipping a costume fitting, $2,300 for missing a single publicity event. By the end of 1947, the total fines were $12,847. That's $165,000 today, all carved from her soul for saying no. By 1948, she was drinking a bottle of wine a day just to numb the pressure. The smile they sold to the world was a mask. At a dinner in Cannes in 1950, she hurled a crystal vase at her husband's head. It sliced his forehead open. That rage wasn't random. It was the boiling point of years of humiliation, betrayal, and surveillance. When she found out that the U.S. military had plastered her image from Gilda onto an atomic bomb test in 1946 without her consent, she broke down. Panic attacks took over. The thought of her face being tied to mass destruction made her physically ill. The public said she was just another drunk starlet. But she was dying in slow motion. Her slurred speech on set, her forgotten lines, people chalked it up to the bottle. In reality, it was something much darker. Decades later, they discovered it had been early-onset Alzheimer's all along. By the time they figured it out in 1980, it had already stolen most of her. She died in 1987, forgotten by many, with nothing left of the $6 million she once had. Medical bills, leeches, and decades of exploitation drained her dry. Jean Harlow was the kind of woman who walked onto a set and made everyone forget to breathe. She was Hollywood's first platinum blonde, a shock of light in a world still learning how to glow on screen. But what people saw, the laughter, the sass, the sex appeal, was only one part of the story. On MGM sets in the early 1930s, she would often stroll past stunned crew members wearing nothing beneath her dressing gown. Director George Cukor wasn't surprised anymore. She never wore underwear to shoots. Tight gowns left no room for modesty, and Jean never seemed to care who was watching. In 1933, while filming Bombshell, she fell into an affair with Max Baer, a married boxing champion. When she got pregnant that September, Baer's wife Dorothea threatened to file a $250,000 alienation of affection lawsuit. That lawsuit would have torched both Jean and MGM. Studio boss Louis B. Mayer panicked. Her contract paid her $4,000 a week, but it also had a strict morality clause. Mayer arranged a secret abortion on October 15, 1933, at a Beverly Hills clinic. He paid the $500 fee out of his own pocket. The trauma didn't end there. The year before, Jean's husband, Paul Byrne, had been found dead with a gunshot wound to the head. His suicide note was cryptic. It said, "Unfortunately, this is the only way to make good the frightful wrong I have done you." That line set Hollywood spinning. Studio fixers rushed to paint Byrne as impotent to clear Jean's name. But new evidence points to a darker truth. Byrne may have been murdered by his former common-law wife, Dorothy Millette, in a jealous rage. The tabloids had a field day. The studio doubled down on her image, and Jean kept performing until her body couldn't take it anymore. By 1937, she was collapsing from exhaustion and kidney failure. The same people who once begged to touch her hair were the ones who let her fade. She died at just 26, her secrets buried with her beneath the glitz. Olive Thomas. She was just 25 when the scream echoed down the marble halls of Paris's Hotel Crillon. Around 3 in the morning, Olive Thomas had swallowed mercury bichloride dissolved in alcohol. A second later, she cried out, "Oh my God," and collapsed. Her husband, Jack Pickford, brother of silent film icon Mary Pickford, rushed to her side. But by the time help came, it was already too late. What followed was 5 days of agony and headlines that wouldn't let go. Newspapers called it the most shocking death in film history. They were in Paris for their second honeymoon. But things weren't soft and glowing. Behind the fancy hotel rooms and champagne toasts was chaos. The couple was reportedly spending about $1,000 a week. Adjusted for today, that's over $13,000 on cocaine and liquor. Olive had just bumped her life insurance up to $20,000, and when the police found the poison bottle sitting neatly on the bathroom counter, suspicions began to swirl. Rumors started pouring in. French tabloids said Olive had found out Jack was cheating with more than one woman, and worse, that he'd given her syphilis. People began to ask why he took so long to call a doctor. He claimed panic, but it cost her critical hours. Even when they made it to the hospital, the American hospital turned them away, afraid of the scandal. They ended up scrambling for private care while reporters camped outside. By the time Olive died on September 10th, she was barely conscious. Some say her last words were about Jack's betrayals. The official story was that she thought the mercury was aspirin, couldn't read the French label, and took it in the dark. But the pieces didn't add up. Still, no one was ever charged. Jack inherited everything, but he was never the same. People who knew him say he kept calling out her name during drunken fits. He died in 1933, young and destroyed, like the final act of a tragedy no one could rewrite. Louise Brooks. She didn't just tiptoe around Hollywood's rules, she smashed through them like she didn't care who was watching. Born in Kansas in 1906, she had that sharp bob haircut, a look that could slice. By 19, she was in Hollywood, making $750 a week and breaking every moral code the studios held dear. She had flings with actors, writers, and women too, including a deep, intense relationship with Pepe Lederer, who happened to be Marion Davies's niece. During filming for Beggars of Life in 1928, everything fell apart. After a fling with a stuntman named Johnny Sinclair, he got back at her by spreading lies. Told the whole set, over 200 people, that she had syphilis. Confronted her in front of everyone. Her co-star Richard Arlen later wrote that she showed no shame at all. Their director, William Wellman, already hated her. He put her in real danger during a train stunt, coming inches from killing her just to make a point. But the real heartbreak hit later. When William Randolph Hearst found out Pepe was gay, he had her institutionalized. Days later, she jumped from a hospital window. That was November 24, 1935. Brooks never got over it. When her husband, Eddie Sutherland, tried to kill himself after finding out she was sleeping with another director, she didn't flinch, just filed for divorce like it was business. When asked why she was so cold to men, she said it straight. She chose her lovers on her terms, no one else's. Pola Negri, she came from Poland with a name no one in Hollywood could pronounce. But within weeks of landing in California in 1922, Pola Negri was the talk of every studio lot. Paramount paid her $3,000 a week when most people didn't even make $30. She asked for black velvet on the walls, chandeliers hanging from her dressing room ceiling, and fresh orchids every single day. And they gave her everything she wanted. That alone cost $200 a week. She showed up to sets in a white Rolls-Royce with gold trim. Her driver wore a uniform she designed herself, sharp like he belonged to royalty. People watched her, talked about her, whispered when she passed by. She made sure they did. Her romance with Charlie Chaplin didn't even last a season, but it was in every newspaper. Then came Rod LaRocque. Then George Fitzmaurice. But it was Rudolph Valentino that made headlines scream. When he died suddenly in August 1926, she collapsed at his funeral. Cameras flashed as she threw white roses on his coffin and demanded the world know they were secretly engaged. No one could look away. But when she got engaged to a Georgian prince just 6 months later, Valentine's Day, 1927, people stopped clapping. They thought it was all a stunt. Her heavy accent didn't help when films started to talk in 1929. By the time she filmed her last real Hollywood movie in 1943, the spotlight had already moved on. But she never did. She kept saying she discovered Valentino, kept saying she made Garbo. She even kept calling herself Negri, like she was still on a marquee. She died in 1987, 90 years old, still playing the part. Frances Farmer. Frances Farmer never asked for that kind of attention. Her name didn't start with scandals, but the ending is darker than almost any other. She was arrested on October 19, 1942, for drunk driving. She didn't have a license. When police asked her to write her job, she wrote something crude on the form, enough to shock everyone in the room. She paid $500 in fines, got probation, and then missed a court date. That's when everything started falling apart. In January 1943, she screamed in court and hit a bailiff. They dragged her out in a straitjacket. Her mother put her in Steilacoom State Hospital the next year, March 1944. She weighed only 108 pounds. The records from that hospital don't read like a treatment plan. They read like torture. She was given 37 insulin shock treatments. They used so much insulin that her body went into comas over and over. They strapped her down for electroshock too, blasting her with up to 110 volts. Some say in 1947 they went even further, that they gave her a lobotomy. The hospital never confirmed it, but a book written by a former patient said it happened. Whether it did or didn't, something was lost during those years. She walked out of that place in 1950, but never really came back. She worked at a small hotel in Eureka, California, earned $1.50 an hour. She didn't act like a star anymore. She barely talked about the past. When she died of cancer in 1982, people started saying her name again. But the version of her that Hollywood once tried to fix or erase had been gone a long time. Barbara Payton. Barbara Payton was once a rising star in Hollywood, a studio darling making $3,000 a week. But all of that began to fall apart on one September night in 1951. She was engaged to Franchot Tone, a well-known actor 20 years older than her. But she was also sleeping with another man, Tom Neal, a former boxer turned actor. The two men finally clashed outside Barbara's house. Tom beat Franco so badly, he ended up in the hospital with a broken nose, a concussion, and a face that needed plastic surgery. That one fight ended Barbara's career. Universal dropped her. She lost her part alongside Gregory Peck in Only the Valiant. The industry turned its back. A year later, she was desperate. That's when Howard Hughes offered her $1,000 for just one night. She said yes. It was the first time she crossed that line, from actress to escort. At first, she charged $500, sometimes $1,000. Her clients were rich, powerful, and dangerous. One of them had ties to Mickey Cohen, the crime boss who ran LA's underworld. When police raided Cohen's circle in 1953, Barbara ran. She crossed the border into Mexico and kept working. That was her only way to survive. She came back to Los Angeles in 1955, but she wasn't the same. Her rates dropped to as low as $20. She started getting arrested, again and again. In 1961, she was caught trying to offer a cop $20 on Sunset Strip. By now, she was spiraling. She wrote a memoir in 1963, telling everything. Her exact words, "I have been thrown out of some of the best joints in Hollywood." Even that book couldn't save her. It barely paid off the $2,000 she owed. By 1967, she was living with her parents in San Diego. On May 8th, her neighbors found her body. She weighed 89 pounds. There were $14 in her purse. The coroner said her heart and liver gave out from years of drinking. She was 39. Lana Turner's story wasn't about collapse. It was about control and how she kept losing it. At 19, she got pregnant. MGM couldn't allow that. Studio boss Louis B. Mayer arranged an abortion. They flew her to Hawaii, told the press it was a promotional trip. In a hotel room, they did the procedure with no anesthesia. Lana's mother held her down while she screamed. The cost, $500, was quietly taken out of her $75 weekly paycheck. No one ever spoke of it again. Her love life turned into headlines. She married 8 times, but nothing compared to what happened with Johnny Stompanato. He worked for Mickey Cohen, too. He was smooth, charming, dangerous. They met in 1957. He followed her everywhere, even to England when she was filming. When Lana tried to leave him, he threatened her. Said he'd throw acid on her face. Said he'd kill her daughter Cheryl. On April 4th, 1958, he showed up drunk at Lana's house, demanded $50,000, screamed at her, hit her. Cheryl was 14. She heard it all, ran to the kitchen, grabbed a carving knife. When she walked in, Johnny had his hands around her mother's neck. Cheryl stabbed him. One strike, right in the stomach. The blade hit his aorta. He collapsed on the pink carpet of Lana's bedroom and bled out before help arrived. The press went wild. Lana cried on the witness stand for 3 hours, telling the world what Johnny did to her. The jury called it justifiable homicide, but her career never fully recovered. The spotlight faded. She started drinking more, sometimes whole bottles of vodka in one day. Her later marriages didn't last. She kept working, but not like before. She lived a long time, but parts of her story stopped the night Johnny died on her floor. Judy Garland. She was just 10 when MGM signed her, and everything changed. Judy Garland was supposed to be a star. What she became instead was a product they controlled from every angle. They assigned her a chaperone who followed her everywhere, even into bathrooms, every move watched, every bite monitored. Louis B. Mayer, the man running the studio, kept calling her names, fat, pig, while forcing her into strict diets made of lettuce, cottage cheese, and chicken soup. She wasn't even a teenager yet. Then the pills started. She was 12. Amphetamines to keep her awake on endless film shoots that stretched 18 hours or more. Barbiturates to knock her out when it was finally over. By the time she wore the ruby slippers in The Wizard of Oz, she was taking up to 80 pills a day. 80. Just to stay on track. Just to stay useful. When she got pregnant in the early 40s, MGM didn't see a child coming into the world. They saw a threat to their asset. Her mother, Ethel, contacted the studio, and they arranged abortions twice. She tried to keep going, but they'd already taken too much. She began arriving late, forgetting lines, acting out. One time she pulled a knife on her manager. The pain came out in flashes. The world watched as she spiraled. Her final concerts in London weren't really concerts at all. She stumbled on stage, slurred. The crowd threw trash. It wasn't even disappointment, it was pity, or maybe anger. She died in 1969, June 22nd. She was 47 years old. They said it was an accidental overdose. She weighed 90 pounds. Mae West. In 1935, Mae West was making more money than anyone in Hollywood. Not just actresses. She was earning more than the studio heads, the producers, the directors. That year alone, her income hit $480,000, which would be around $8.4 million today. And all of it came from stirring up trouble on purpose. Years earlier, in 1927, she wrote and starred in a play called Sex. The name alone was enough to get her arrested for corrupting public morals. They sentenced her to 10 days on Welfare Island, but Mae didn't play it like punishment. She showed up with silk underwear, charmed the prison staff, had dinner with the warden and his wife, and used the whole thing as a press opportunity. Reporters swarmed. Headlines exploded. Her fame shot up overnight. But her boldness wasn't limited to the stage or jail. Mae had actually been married since 1911. She was just 17 when she secretly wed a vaudeville performer named Frank Wallace in Milwaukee. That marriage stayed hidden for 24 years. She denied it, joked about never wanting to be in an institution, and stuck to that story until 1935, when a courthouse clerk randomly found the papers. By that time, they'd been married for over 3 decades. Mae West didn't just make noise, she made money. During the Great Depression, while other studios struggled, Paramount Pictures relied on her. Her movies pulled in big crowds and big profits. She basically saved the company from going broke. And even when she wasn't the lead, she stole the spotlight. In the 1932 film Night After Night, she only had a small role, but her lines were so sharp and funny that co-star George Raft said, "She stole everything but the cameras." People quoted her everywhere. Her style was clever, blunt, and totally fearless. When talking about her love life, she once said, "Sometimes it seems to me I've known so many men that the FBI ought to come to me first to compare fingerprints." But not everyone was entertained. In 1937, she did a radio performance with Charlie McCarthy, a puppet voiced by ventriloquist Edgar Bergen. The jokes were too suggestive for some listeners. The backlash was so huge that NBC banned her from the air and even banned people from saying her name for the next 13 years.